For me, the formative years were in Birmingham, Alabama, where at the age of 6, 7, and 8, when I would come home from school, I had to pass through a yard across the street from where my house was. And the yard was filled with clovers, and I can't tell you how many four-leaf clovers I found on the way home. Sometime I would come home with two hands full of four-leaf clovers. And somehow I guess I got the idea that looking downward, looking on the ground for treasure, whether it be for four-leaf clovers or fossils or Indian arrowheads, it seemed like a magical place to find treasure. I started doing it, and I guess somehow I thought treasure could be found by anyone. The inspiration to write both of the books and to have the treasure hunt go along with it really came from an Englishman by the name of Kit Williams, who almost 25 years ago wrote a story and illustrated it about a golden hare, like a rabbit. And he hid clues in his book and in his illustrations, and England went crazy. And as a young man, I had just graduated college. I had a math degree. I had some art training, and I thought, well, I'll just buy this book. I'll read it, and by dinner time, I will know where the golden hare was. Of course, that didn't happen. Like everyone else, I was mesmerized by the book. I read it over and over again. Eventually, I'd read it so many times the pages fell out, and I got nowhere, but I thought it was a wonderful idea. I said, someday I want to do this. Of course, I was a poor working young man at the time, and I needed a job, and I didn't have any money to buy any treasures. But I never forgot the idea. I had a very successful business career for about 20 years. I sold my last big company about 10 years ago. Had enough time and enough money to start working on this. I started working on it 8 hours a day, did the illustrations, ended up buying the treasures and having the treasures made, and that's how the treasure hunt got started. Creating codes and breaking codes is actually something that's very difficult to do. It turns out that there's really only two things you can easily do to textual information. You can confuse it, and you can diffuse it. So if you took the word cat, C-A-T, you could confuse it by rearranging the letters, making it A-C-T. And you could diffuse it by perhaps putting in some extra letters. So you could put in letters in between A, X, C, F, T, E. So you can confuse it and diffuse it. And it turns out if you have a lot of information to do that to, you can start to see the pattern. So it's actually very hard to encode something so that it's a secret. So I got the idea in my first book that I would combine pictures and some sort of encoding of information. So in my first book, A Treasures Trove, I used pictures to encode pairs of numbers. And these pairs of numbers, when decoded correctly, would spell out a location. For instance, the butterfly was first found in Ricketts Glen State Park by Mr. Jake Polterak, who figured out Ricketts Glen State Park was the place to go. And he didn't know where to go when he got to the park. The park was very big, and the gold token that he was looking for was very small. And by reading the book with his 4-year-old daughter, Allie, they actually figured out that maybe that wasn't a vine that I drew a picture of. Maybe it was a park road map. And maybe the tree that was near the dragonfly, which is the token they found, maybe that's a real tree. Mr. Polterak got in his car, drove 4 hours to Ricketts Glen State Park, parked his car down a road that looked just like the vine in the book. Went to where the fairy was pointing on the road map, saw a tree that looked just like one I drew in the book, stuck his hand in the knothole of that tree and pulled out the $23,000 dragonfly token. I don't really think I was so interested in codes as rather the challenge of hiding something. So how can you hide something on a piece of paper that if you don't know it's there, you'll never see it, but if you know it's there, you can't miss it. And so when I hid it in pictures, people thought it was just part of the picture. And in reality, it was part of a secret code that now that hundreds of thousands of people know where it is, they see it every time they open the book and turn to a page. I've received so many wonderful emails from parents and sometimes from children where they've told me they've worked on the book together. I've had the greatest things said to me or written to me like, this is the first time my 9-year-old son came home from school and said, Mom, we're going to the bookstore now. Or I get emails from mothers who say, "This is the first time my 13-year-old son has spoken to me in a year, and we worked on your book together for over 2 months." A gentleman wrote me that right before he went into an operation, he was talking about the book with his wife, and when he woke up, he wanted to know if she'd solved any clues. I didn't really set out to make this a family book, but it somehow became that way. Parents and their children are doing it together. When I read at schools, I see young people doing it with other young people, and they're just so excited by, there's a clue here on this page, and children look at this differently than adults do. And they're going to find real treasure if they can just figure out this clue. So it's been a wonderful experience. Of course, I've taken all of those concepts and tried to apply them to the next book, Secrets of the Alchemist Stadther. So once again, the new story has all of the old good guys in it, Zach, Anna, and Pook, and the good fairies and the bad fairies. Of course, there's a new bad guy. But it's also a treasure hunt again. This time it's for 100 jeweled rings. It's a worldwide treasure hunt. Anyone can participate, and there are 7 countries where you can actually redeem the information for a jeweled ring. So I think people will do it again together. I still read at schools, and I think it'll be a wonderful worldwide family experience. In both of my books, I wanted it not only to be a story, and a story that young people or even adults would enjoy. In fact, I wrote the story that pleased me. I didn't really have an age group in mind, either in the first book, A Treasure's Trove, or in the second book, Secrets of the Alchemist Stadther. It's just a story that pleased me. I tried to work into both stories a parallel with the treasure hunt that was going on in both books. So in the first book, A Treasure's Trove, the story was about 12 forest creatures that were turned into beautiful jewels by a dark dust. And then, of course, they disappeared and a bad guy took them. But the real treasure hunt was for 12 real jewels, just like the ones in the story. So if there was a firefly in the story, there was a real jewel firefly, and I believe it was worth about $280,000. There was a real spider jewel. It was worth $450,000, and of course, the spider was an important character in the story. In my second book, Secrets of the Alchemist Stadther, the storyline roughly revolves around a new bad guy who wants to get the fairy rings of eternal life, which are jeweled rings worn on chains around the necks of good fairies. And these rings keep them from getting old or dying. And of course, he wants these for the dark fairies. So I've worked in a storyline that's about rings, and the treasure hunt is about rings. It will be for 100 jeweled rings worth over $2 million. The top ring will be worth over $1 million by itself. In the first treasure hunt in the story of Treasure's Trove, I actually chose general locations around the United States, and then I actually drove around the entire United States, back and back again. Once I got into the area that I chose, I would actually then look for specific parks or places that were public that would lend themselves to hiding of a jewel. So in some cases, it meant either no one was in a park, or it was a rainy day, or it was early in the morning, or maybe the park stayed open a little bit after dark so no one could see me. Or strangely enough, if a park was immensely crowded, it's very easy to be inconspicuous when there's thousands of people standing nearby. So I could walk over to a tree and drop the gold token in a knothole, and nobody would ever notice me. In fact, in the Badlands, where I hid the rhinoceros beetle token, there were probably 300 people within 100 feet of me as I walked over to the only tree on the horizon and dropped the token into the knothole. In Moab, Utah, I put the token in the city park, surrounded by dozens of houses in plain view of anyone who was looking out their window or sitting in their car or sitting on their porch, and no one saw me do it. For the second treasure hunt, however, I don't tell what I hid, where I hid it, how I hid it, if I hid it, if they have to see somebody, if they have to go somewhere. Nothing is revealed. All of the information, just like the clues, will be in the book, and people this time will have to figure out what they have to do. Coming out September 26th, along with Secrets of the Alchemist Stadther in a one-day worldwide release, will be 5 coloring and activity books that will be appropriate for young people. There will be puzzles, there'll be word jumbles, some coloring involved. We also have 101 new puzzles as a new puzzle book companion coming out. And of course, we have the existing books of a Treasures Trove and the solution book, which people may be interested in to find out what I was thinking when I first released a Treasures Trove. And coming out along with it is the audio book, which is a wonderfully narrated story with about a dozen voiceover actors and actresses. It's fully symphonically scored from beginning to end. It has special sound effects with it, and it actually has a bonus fairy song feature at the end. I have two websites associated with the first two books. The first is atreasurestrove.com, which explains about the first treasure hunt. It shows the jewels. It's got a wonderful forum there so you can see what people were thinking as they were searching for the jewels. The second site is alchemistdar.com. You can get on that site to learn about the next book, Secrets of the Alchemist Dar. You can also see the prologue in animated form to the new book, so you can get a little hint to what the book's about. And on both sites, there's a free game site.